No one ruled from Earth. The answer sent shivers through space. The great empires of the galactic core, the ancient federations of the outer spiral arms, the merchant guilds of the nebula clusters, all looked toward the small blue planet with unease, for there had never been a ruling power from Earth, never a leader, never a council, never a single voice that spoke for its people. And yet the planet remained untouched and whole, while countless civilizations rose and fell in endless cycles of conquest and ruin. Fleets that had scoured worlds and reduced moons to dust, never so much as approached the fragile world that hung in the quiet of the Sol system, for reasons no one understood. And so it stood, Earth the anomaly, Earth the unanswered question, Earth the shadow upon the maps of the void. For centuries, scholars debated the cause. Was it divine intervention? Was it a technological defense beyond comprehension? Was it some hidden pact enforced by an unseen power? Theories swirled in the halls of academia and in the war rooms of empires, but none dared test the silence. None dared step beyond the unspoken boundary that surrounded Earth. For though no fleet had ever been repelled, none had ever returned either. The few rogue ships that tried to approach were swallowed by the dark, leaving only garbled transmissions filled with static and whispers, and sometimes a single word repeated in agony before all went silent. And so the galaxy waited in eternal uncertainty, and willing to provoke the unknown, yet unable to forget that Earth remained still and waiting. Legends grew in the void, stories of a terrible guardian, of a force that lurked beneath the planet's surface, sleeping in the oceans, in the mountains, in the very air. Myths whispered in dark corridors of kings and conquerors who had tried to claim Earth only to vanish from history, leaving behind empty thrones and shattered dynasties. One empire after another crumbled without explanation, its rulers having spoken of Earth in hushed voices before their own subjects turned against them with hollow eyes and voiceless rage. Yet Earth remained ordinary. Its people lived and died unaware of the fear that gripped the stars above. They built their cities, they wrote their books, they dreamed of reaching the void. Yet something always held them back. Something always whispered in their bones that they were not to leave, that they were to remain, that they were to stay. And so they did, locked in their own world, their own histories, their own small wars, while the cosmos trembled at their name. One day, great fleet gathered on the edge of the solar system, a force unlike any before, led by rulers who had tired of the question, who had decided that they would break the silence and know the truth. They came in numbers beyond counting, armed with weapons that had torn apart suns, with shields that had turned aside the wrath of the ancients. They came without fear, for they had conquered all they had faced, and they had no gods left to obey. And so they crossed the threshold of the forbidden, and the void itself seemed to recoil as they passed into Sol. As the first ships neared the orbit of Mars, the transmissions began, the whispers, the static, the voices that were not voices. And though the fleet's commanders laughed at the superstitions of old, their laughter faded when the words began to take form, to slip through their minds in languages they had never learned, to etch themselves into their very thoughts. And then the silence came, not the absence of sound, but the absence of everything, the absence of self, the absence of time, the absence of meaning. And in that abyss, they felt something looking back, something ancient, something patient, something that had always been waiting. One by one, the ships ceased to be. Their hulls did not burn, their crews did not scream. They simply ceased their existence, erased as if they had never been, as if they had never even imagined themselves into being. And the last ship before it was undone sent a single transmission back to the void, a message that no empire dared decrypt, for they knew already what it would say. And so the galaxy returned to its silent vigil, watching Earth, knowing now that the answer was not meant to be known, knowing now that the absence of a ruler was no accident, knowing now that Earth needed no ruler, that Earth had never needed a ruler, that Earth itself was the ruler of all. The empires of the galaxy whispered their warnings to the generations that followed, forbidding their own kind from so much as gazing too long at the small blue dot that had devoured the ambitions of the arrogant, the reckless, and the foolish. And so Earth drifted on its eternal path around the sun, untouched, undisturbed, unchallenged, its people still oblivious to the cosmic fear they inspired, living their brief lives as the masters of a world that needed no conquest, no dominion, no war, for it had already won the only battle that ever truly mattered. And so it remained the one planet in the universe that none would dare claim, for its throne was invisible, yet absolute, and its power was never in ruling, but in simply being,